Okay, guys, so December is in the books, the second month of me trying to fix some of my bad habits, trade a lot smaller. And let's just kind of go through it here. We'll jump right into it and talk about what I did well this month and what I did poorly. If you start by just looking at my little earnings calendar here, you can see I made a little over $16,000 on the month, which, it's definitely not bad money when you take a step back and think about it big picture, what that comes out to on an annual salary if you can average that per month. But it was a bit disappointing for me, especially because my month got off to such a good start. And then, especially the last few days that I was trading, it really fell apart on me. Now, this was a little bit shorter of a month for me personally. I chose not to trade a lot around Christmas time and New Year's. I was home with family. I was on my laptop, and I just really wasn't all that interested. I knew I could kind of use a break from the markets, and I just had other priorities. And then Monday the 7th was a travel day for me, so I didn't trade it all that day either. But let's just kind of go through the month a little bit here and talk about what I did well, what I did poorly. The first 2 weeks, those were just two great weeks of trading for me. I felt like I did a really good job. Between those 8 trading days, I only had 3 entries into my losses journal where I broke a rule, whether it be play too large or not cut a loss. And the really only one worth talking about a little bit is Giga. That was the biggest of the 3. It was a $3,000 loss on Tuesday the 1st. And Giga, that was a shortened to resistance setup. I was trying to play off of the 315 daily resistance level, expecting that to hold. And I wasn't entirely wrong. It did hold 315 as a top for a while. It did have some good hard pulls where I could have been out for some profits. But I got a little over patient. I expected 315 to just stick firm and not break through, and I wound up having to eat it when it broke through later in the day. Now, Giga, the mistake there was that I just played it a little bit too big. Shorts into resistance, they are my favorite setup, or one of them at least, and they are one that I feel like is worthy of playing that double risk, where I'm risking $2,000 instead of my standard $1,000 per trade. Now, unfortunately, I lost $3,000 on Giga. And that was just because I got a little bit overeager. There was a little bit of slippage on my exit. So I just sized in a little bit too large from the start. But it wasn't one where I dug in my heels and fought. Nothing like that. Just a little bit overeager, like I said. And I took about $1,000 of excess loss than I should have. Again, I will link to my losses journal so you guys can read the other ones from these first couple weeks yourselves. But really, they weren't bad at all money-wise. Basically, I was cutting when I needed to cut for the most part, and those 3 losses really did not have that much excess loss. There were no big losers like I'd had in November, and even well into the 3rd week, no big losers. Now, the first day that looks really bad on this calendar is Thursday the 17th. I lost $5,500 that day. Pretty much wiped out my entire week up to that point. And you might be thinking, okay, well, he must have broken a really serious rule or taken a really big loss. And the reality of that day for me was just that I was wrong on everything. And sometimes those days happen. I made 4 or 5 trades, and I think I was probably wrong on every single one of them. Maybe I had one small gain in there. But there really was only one loss on the 17th that was bigger than it should have been. And again, that was just a case of either playing a little too large or not cutting the loss. And I lost $2,000 instead of the $1,000 that I meant to risk. But everything else, it was about a $1,000 loss, maybe $500 on one of them. And it just all added up really fast on me. And I came out of that day, I really didn't feel that discouraged. Sure, it was an ugly red day, but I didn't feel like I had traded that poorly. I stuck to my plans. I cut when I needed to cut for the most part. And sometimes those days just happen. So I really wasn't down on myself. I wasn't down on my trading. But I just think that big red number on the calendar had a little bit more of a mental effect on me than it should have, because the next 3 trading days, Friday the 18th and then Monday the 21st, Tuesday the 22nd, those were my 3 just god-awful days where I just basically threw discipline out the window. And I made as many mistakes in those 3 days that I had up to that point in the month. Starting with Friday the 18th, RWLK, and that was one, I think I have 2 entries on RWLK on my loss journal, but the first one was the painful one, and that was a $5,000 loss. So, that kind of tells you, what could have been for that day, because I still ended green $3,000 with a $5,000 loser in there. But RWLK, it was a first day runner, ran pretty big. It got from $8 up to almost $14 on that day, and then closed around 11. So the next morning when it was gapping up, I was thinking, okay, plenty of overhead resistance. And I went ahead and I tried a morning short. I had a couple risk levels in mind. The first of which was about the 1250 area, where it had held under all afternoon the previous day. And then the second of which was Thursday's highs, so up in the 1350 area. And so my plan going into that morning was, okay, I'll short into the 1250 area, and if that breaks, I'll cut the loss and restart again up near the high of the day. And even if that had been my plan, I would have wound up cutting 2 losses, and I probably would have lost a couple $1,000. But I didn't stick to my plan, and instead of cutting it on the 1250-ish break like I was supposed to when I had my starter, I wound up adding higher. I wound up holding through that 1250 break and then saying, okay, well, I might as well try to get my average up and then cover into a predictable fade. So then I tried shorting some in the low 13s. I added to a position outside of my plan. I was already down a couple $1,000 on it because, I hadn't cut my loss at my risk. And then the position just kept going on me. I broke past Friday's high. I had to cut a little bit on that high a day break. And then I did an okay job of covering into the fade from 1450-ish down to sub 13. But I held on to a piece. I held on to about half of it because I still had in my mind, I want to turn this loser into a winner. I want to give this a chance to fade big. And then when it ramped back up and broke back past $14, I kind of knew, okay, I need to get out of this. And so I cut the rest at about 14. But that was a case of not cutting a loss from the start and then fighting the position, adding outside of my plan. And those are the ones where the big losses happen. And that's why RWLK was a $5,000 loss, because I did everything wrong. I made my 2 big mistakes that I was trying to avoid. And I think that is ultimately what set me up for the early week frustration next week, the 21st and 22nd, because I was looking at my little calendar saying, okay, I only made a few $1,000s last week. And I really should have been happy to have been green at all. But instead, I had my own goals and my own ambitions in mind, where I wanted to, have another $40,000 month. And November, $40,000 was great for November, especially trading small. But November had some insane opportunities. December did not have the same kind of opportunities November did. So it makes sense, if the opportunity's not there, you're going to make less money. So it definitely fell into my head a little bit of trying to match November and trying to just do a little too much and make up for lost time, so to speak. I was at about $23,000 on the month, and I needed to make 17 more in the next 9 trading days, assuming that I traded all of those days. And so the 21st was really where I made my first mistake, and that was on WNDW. I had made all my money on Friday the 18th on the WNDW short when it failed near $5 and panicked all the way down into the 350 area. I had a really nice short on that. But the next day, on that Monday, I was thinking, okay, maybe this can panic more. It'll have a second down day. And I got short in the 390s near market open and got the panic down to 360, but didn't pay myself any. So to see a little bit over a $2,000 profit evaporate like that was pretty frustrating on me. And then even though it was breaking past the $3.90, $4 area later in the morning, I chose not to cut it. I was just kind of holding and hoping. I didn't want my winner to turn into break even. And then I didn't want to take a loss. And so then I just let it get more and more out of control. And it turned into a swing position, which is never a good thing. So I wound up swinging my WNDW. I think it was 7,500 shares of it. And then green realized on the day for the 21st, but reality that is if I had cut the WNDW loss near the close or somewhere in there, it probably would have been more like a negative $1,500 day. And unfortunately, swinging it overnight opened the door to just the worst day of the month, which was Tuesday the 22nd. I lost almost $9,500 that day. And that was, again, a few of my plans not working out, which is going to happen. But I let them not work out with size. And, this is not an excuse, but I was definitely overtired that day. And I definitely don't mean that as an excuse, because you should be able to trade tired. You should be able to trade, under a number of different circumstances. But when I'm fatigued, I definitely make worse decisions. And I was kind of aware of it. RWLK, I took my second loss on it that morning. I believe I was shorting a gap down, and it flew back against me. And before it was even at my risk, or before I even was down $1,000 or had to cut the position, I was like, oh, fuck you, RWLK. Like, I'm yelling at my computer screen. And that's just a terrible sign right there. That means I am emotionally not in the right place. If 10 minutes into the day I'm yelling at a position that I'm down less than $1,000 on. So it was just building frustration, and I'm sure part of that was knowing WNDW was kind of going against me. And now that morning also, WNDW had a nice morning panic down to about the $4 area again. It gave me my exit. It gave me my chance to get out for, $1,000 or less of loss. And I didn't take it. And then that grinded back up against me all day. I put an ad on it in about the 420s, I think. So again, adding outside of my risk, adding outside of my plan, fighting a position I'm already down too much on. And I wound up having to stop out all of my WNDW on I think it was a 440 break later that day. I got really worried about that level breaking, and because it had been consolidating, and I was thinking, oh man, this could really squeeze against me now. I knew Wednesday the 23rd I was flying, so I wasn't going to be able to keep swinging and keep watching the position because the flight I was taking wouldn't have Wi-Fi. So it was just kind of a perfect storm of stupid, where I just kept doing dumb things and trying to salvage the loser, turn it into a winner. And to top it all off, I had one other loss that day on AEZS. It had been holding under the 530 area on the chart for a while, and it's former runner, kind of low float, and I just got a little overexcited by the breakout. I meant to risk $2,000 buying the breakout, which buying a daily chart break like that, I probably should have been risking $1,000 instead of $2,000. Really, the elite daily breakouts are the ones where there isn't a bunch of overhead resistance, and AEZS certainly does not fit that bill. The thing was down from $15, so there's still plenty of overhead sellers, even though there's that daily break. And ultimately, it only spiked up above 550 a little bit before fading back all day. Didn't pay myself a piece, didn't take any off at all, and wound up having to cut it all later near my risk level. And that one's again in the loss journal because I just didn't quite account for slippage on that. Lost a few $100 more than I should have, but it's not like that was a catastrophic loss journal entry. But just added to the day, and it just made it that much worse. So that was a very disappointing end of the month for me. And I had been thinking about how I wanted to size up, but now, after a few days like that, I can't let myself. I need to prove to myself I can stick to my rules for longer than this. Now, getting a little more into sort of where I'm at psychologically, I think it is kind of hard on me to be trading smaller like this, this $1,000 risk. It's really, really hard not to focus on where I've been in the past and the kind of size I've played in the past. And it's really hard to be satisfied with these gains that I'm making. And so all of that, I think, kind of feeds in a little bit too to the overtrading, to the not really wanting to cut losses because I don't want to see my monthly totals go down. I don't want to see myself making even less. So it's certainly not helping, but it's something I need to overcome because Nate does a great job of explaining this in his New Year's blog post, but it's just never going to be enough, no matter how much you're making. You make $100,000, you want to make it to $200,000. Then, of course, you want to make it to $500,000. Then you want to make it to $1 million, and you just always want more and more and more. And that's kind of what I fell into and what started a lot of my problems in the first place, trying to push size and take it to the next level before I was ready to. And I think that's how I developed a lot of my bad habits, because I wasn't cutting losses, because I wanted to take it to that next level, and I wanted to see my months get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I need to take a step back and just kind of remind myself like how sick it is that I can't appreciate a $16,000 month and what that means. I mean, if you rewind a few years, and I would have been thrilled by a $16,000 month. I would have been so excited by the fact that that's almost on pace for a $200,000 a year. And now it just, like I said, it just doesn't feel like enough. And I need to just recalibrate myself mentally. I need to get myself back to the point where I can appreciate what I have. And that's why I can't allow myself to up my size yet, because sure, I could go to $1,500 risk. I could go to $2,000 risk. And maybe that would solve my problem for now. Maybe that would kind of alleviate a little bit of the stress I'm feeling and make me say like, okay, like good. Now I'm making twice as much a month, like whatever. But how long till that's not enough? And then the mistakes just get bigger and bigger and bigger again. So I need to, I've said it a couple times, but I just need to learn to be satisfied. And I need to learn to keep myself from always wanting more. Because until I can do that, I'm just going to keep falling back into these same issues where, after a slow week, I'm going to, or, what I feel like is a slow week, I'm going to lose control and fall back into lack of discipline. So January, at least half of January, is going to be $1,000 risk again and $2,000 max on the very best setups. If I can prove to myself through the first half of January that I can, stick to these rules and I can have another really good start to the month, maybe then I'll let myself go up to 1,500. But chances are that I'm going to wait till February to do that, and I need to put together an all-around very solid month to begin with. The one other change, or two other changes, I guess I should say, that I'm going to make in January. December, I chose not to track FOMO trades. I wanted to focus on, the trades that led to my biggest losses, which were not cutting losers and playing too large. And I think I need to track FOMO again because I don't think my win rate was quite as high as it usually is. It felt like I took a lot of losses in December. Even though a lot of them weren't very big, it still felt like I was just taking way too many losers. So I'm going to get back to tracking FOMO. I kind of talked myself out of it in December, and I think that was probably a little bit laziness fueled. So January, I'm buckling back down. I'm tracking FOMO, and I'm going to really try to hold myself accountable for the overtrading aspect of things as well. I mean, I should be able to focus on a few things at once as far as cutting losers and FOMO and trading too large is concerned. I'm also going to add a new column to track, which is adding outside of risk. Because, trading too large can mean one of two things. Either I fought the stock, I added outside of risk, and, those are the ones where I really, really get into trouble. Or it could just mean that I was a little over exuberant. I was played it just a little bit too big from the start. Maybe I didn't account for slippage. Something like Giga on December 1st, where it's still a bigger loss than it should have been, but it's not that much bigger. So I'm going to start tracking, added outside of risk or fought the stock or however I want to phrase it. But I need to be especially accountable in that area. And I need to keep that number to zero month after month after month. And it's really hard to do because sometimes, you blow through your one resistance level. You really want to add to your short. You really want to play at the next resistance level. But if that resistance level fails, you just lose that much bigger. So I think my punishment just has to be, if I'm not cutting my loss, if I'm in longer than I should be, I just can't add. It's gotta be my punishment. Like if that means I miss a great fade back from the main resistance level, well, maybe that'll teach me a lesson. Maybe that'll teach me I need to cut and I need to restart higher rather than just holding onto a position like an idiot and hoping for, the stock to turn around and go in my favor. So January, like I'm not going to allow myself any room for error on this. Like the goal for January is 0 of those. I don't want to do it once. I don't want a single position to be added outside of risk. And I don't think that it's any surprise that my two biggest losers of December are WLK and WNDW. I did that on both of them. So that's got to stop. I'm going to cut that out. But overall, December, although I've expressed some frustration, although I've told you about the main mistakes of the month, overall it was an improvement from November. I know I traded less days, so it's kind of hard to compare. But I only had 6 times I played too large. I had 4 times I didn't cut the loss, compared to November, where I think that was 6 and 6, it was 6 and 6. So I probably would have played too large another time or two. I mean, knowing the mental state I was in if I had kept trading in December. But it's a hard thing to project. It's hard to say if I would have kept these numbers at 6 and 4, if I would have done a little bit worse and had to add a couple. But in terms of the how much did I lose column on these mistakes. December was $22,225. November, I've got some FOMO trades in here. If I deleted those, maybe it would come down a little bit, but November was $43,780. So that's a huge difference. The losses, for the most part, were a lot more controlled in December than in November. There were a lot fewer big mistakes, no 5-figure mistakes, which makes me real happy because I know I took the one with AVXL in November. And I also had a $7,200 GNC loser. I think December, my worst loss was about $5,000. It was actually WNDW, yeah, 5,400. So the losses are overall trending down, getting a little bit smaller, but there's still work to be done. So January, I'm going to make those couple changes, and I'm going to hopefully have a lot better things to report to you at the end of the month. But these discipline issues, they're not an overnight fix. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and I'm just going to keep on trying to follow my rules and keep holding myself accountable by doing these monthly recaps for you guys. And I just hope you guys can take something away from it every time, and I hope that I can continue to improve every time. So thanks for your time, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you early February for the January recap.